Good morning, friends. It is so delightful to be back with you today. I'm especially delighted to be bringing you a conversation with my fellow rooter, Nick Slie, especially as we are getting ready to go to Alternate Routes for Roots Week. It's a special opportunity to be with anybody who is an Alternate Routes friend and family member. But as we prepare to go to Roots, there's this special tingle in the air as we all pull out the suitcase and begin to get ready to make our sojourn to North Carolina. I've been a member of Alternate Routes for almost 20 years ago, and for almost 20 years. And that first summer when I went, I think it was the very first night of performances. We went to this sort of open room chapel where we were performing at the time, and there was this amazing theater performance where this young man had his head stuck in a bowl of water for what felt like an impenetrable amount of time. And then all of a sudden he pulled his head up and just like sucked in this huge amount of air. And that was the moment that I met Nick Slie. Um, Nick is a theater performer who imbues so much physicality and heart and spirituality into his work. He is a man of the land of New Orleans and Bulbancha, and it is my great pleasure to bring to you a conversation with my friend Nick Slie. Knock, knock, knock. Nick, are you there?
I'm here.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Nick. How are
How's
you?
it going? I'm very good this morning. How are you?
Did you enjoy my little moment of theater as I pretended you weren't actually there?
I was really taken right back there with you. So thank you for reminding me of that. Uh, for what seemed like it always seemed like a pretty long time for my head to be in that bucket of water as well when I was doing it.
Yeah,
So thank you for
that
that
was
reminder.
incredible piece that you did that was about the head in the bucket of water was a symbol of a man who was drowning from not enough air because he had lung cancer, right?
Well, there was a lot of imagery in that show, and there certainly
Mhm.
was that moment. That particular moment of the bucket of water that I think you're referring to in the beginning of this piece called Lugaru, which was produced with Art Spot Productions and Mondo Bizarro. Um, this man who has this sort of maybe is afflicted with the curse. The Lugaru is the Cajun werewolf, and maybe this man who is afflicted with a curse. He arrives at a monastery, and in the beginning of his journey, it's like a sort of the journey of a 28-day moon cycle. The monks are trying to expel the curse through their way of expelling a curse, which is to put him through a pretty rigorous sequence of ritual and prayer. And when they're realizing that is not working, they sort of move to more uh, strenuous tactics, we could say. And so that's actually this imagined series of him being dunked into water, which was a thing about people who were afflicted with curses, is that they thought they could sort of um, take it out of them by just dunking him. And of course, that doesn't work. And then the show goes on. So, but there was a moment later where that a man who is gasping for air, who is afflicted with lung cancer, is in the show. So that's very perceptive of you.
You were doing the Lugaroo all the way back in 2005. I did not realize that piece had already been in development back then. I
Okay,
can
so maybe we're thinking of a different piece, but I'm trying to remember a time in 2005. The piece I remember in 2005 was Catching Him in Pieces. That was
that's
the
what
first piece we
yeah.
ever brought to Roots. And I don't remember my head being dunked in a bucket of water there. But these things all get conflated a long
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I guess I could have been, but I would have to check the tape on that one.
Okay.
Um,
So let's go back to the beginning. As Maria von Trapp says, it's a very good place to start. I want to
yes.
introduce folks to who you are as just a human before we get to your art making. Where were you born? Where did you grow up? Tell us about your
Hmm.
early days.
Yeah, I was born in Bulbancha, New Orleans. I was born at a woman's hospital, actually in Jefferson Parish. And I had spent most of my younger days and adult life here in Louisiana. My mother's people are from the bayou along the region of St. James Parish and the River Road, and my daddy's people are from New Orleans. And both of those families have been here for about 10 generations in Louisiana.
Wow. So you're just as Cajun as they come.
Yeah, learning, it's actually been a joy through art, actually, to get really interested in. And I think that I've become a steward of my own family's heritage. But I've learned along the way that there's a grand mixture of people that run through my blood. There's Acadian and Cajun. There's a little teensy bit of Italian. There's German. There's French. There's Creole. There is a whole mess of people. The South Louisiana is pretty famous for its delta and the Mississippi River, and I always like to think that the diversity of that deltaic system and all of the energy and all of the nutrients and all of the beauty that it brings to us, it also brought a lot of people here because of the level of commerce along the Mississippi River. So there's been a lot of people along the River Road and through New Orleans that have made their way here. And, a ton of those people came under pretty dire circumstances, and a lot of them intermarried for survival. So there's a lot of mixing and melting of cultures here, where I'm from.
And when did you start making your way, toward being a theater maker? Was that an early call for you? Did it? I got a sense, I think, from some of our early conversations that you didn't have a wandering journey toward art making the way that I did, that you kind of got into it pretty soon.
Maybe, well, I had an excellent high school theater teacher. His
Mm.
name is Chris Frederick. He was sort of the first person, not only who taught me about the craft of theater, but he was really outstanding at making a group. And um, I think I was as interested in the ensemble making process as I was being on stage. But we did this production of Godspell when I was a senior in high school, and it was incredible and it was amazing. And at the end of it, I remember thinking, I don't know that this is something that I'm going to continue to pursue. Um, I think it was partly because I felt the power of that work, and I was like, wow, this storytelling stuff is pretty powerful and also could be all consuming for me. And I don't think I'm going to become an artist.
Mm.
So I definitely found it for a moment. And then when I got into college, I was like, I need to do something else. So I was like, I'm going to become a marketing major. I'm going to become a nurse. Or, I mean, I just went around and around trying to figure out what it was. And by chance, I was walking through Coates Hall in Louisiana State University, and I ran into a sign for a class called Invisible Man, and it was an adaptation of Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. That's what we're going to do for the whole class. And this woman, Trish Suchi, was directing it. And I just decided, this looks really interesting. I'm going to sign up for this. And then from that class till now, has been a pretty long path of being involved again in theater, and mostly because someone opened my eyes to the idea that you don't have to make like theater with a capital T, as I would call it. You don't have to do institutional theater. You don't have to be in a theater. That the skills that we learn as part of our craft can be used for anything. And that's when I really dove deeply there.
I had done a project of walking with people for 45 days to the lead up of my 45th birthday. And I walked with you on one of those days and I wrote
Mhm.
it. And that was actually something that you had talked about then. So I feel like this is part of like the Nick Slie canon, like part of your contribution to uh, the world and knowledge, is this distinction between capital T theater and little T theater. So can you sort of go more into this and why you think it's important for us to understand what you do and how
Mhm.
we as a society sort of get separated from ourselves through that notion of like institutional theater?
Totally. I want to say first, I have to thank my students and the place that inspires me so much, the city of New Orleans, for this distinction, really. Um, I began to notice, being in New Orleans, that there was theater everywhere, that there was like live, vibrant culture everywhere I stepped, outside of my home, on the street, just everywhere I went. There seemed to be the most alive theater, and the robustness and the vibrancy of the people who were there. It was just so alive. And I was realizing that when I went into the theater, that sometimes I was having that experience, but for the most part, that's not what was happening in my body. There really wasn't as much electricity. And I also started to notice that the students that I teach at Nunez Community College were never in the theater shows that I went to. And I just realized during that moment that I was teaching theater, and no one had ever taught me the meaning of the word. So I simply started investigating the meaning of the word, and realized that that word means to see or witness in a place, or the witnessing place. And so when I discovered that, I learned that all of my instincts in my body were actually true. That this capital T theater that I call the institutional theater, the bricks and mortar theater, the theater where you sort of dress up, you buy a ticket, you go and see the show. That a lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times, it did not bring to me the same sort of emotional landscape as the little T theater, which was the witnessing place. So when I started to investigate that, I started to realize, you know, theater performance happens everywhere, especially in South Louisiana. It happens at our meals, it happens in our families, it happens at music concerts, it happens on the streets, it happens at carnival. And that a lot of the things about the institutional theater that really don't provide access to everyone started to bother me a little bit. And I just started to do that investigation. I don't have any profound judgment of the capital T theater. It's not like I don't spend time there. I do, and I see a lot of work that I think is very alive and very vibrant. But those making that distinction for myself made me realize that I could share with myself, my students, and others the fact that this type of work is happening all around us, and story work is happening all around us, and we don't have to feel like we're part of an institution for that to be accessible in our lives, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to get back to, what and whether the separation, the distinctions between storytelling and theater might be, but I want to keep with you and your journey.
Hmm.
So you got back into this theater making thing, and it's been your journey, your path ever since
Hmm.
college. I'm fascinated with the way that your work sort of evolves and iterates, and how one thing leads to another in this really beautiful way. So I watched as Bizarro led to Cry You One, led to Ballad of Ezel. Like it all has this beautiful theme of connection to the land and climate justice. Can you talk about that from your perspective, how these projects um, evolve in that way for you?
Absolutely. I mean, I first should say that most of the work I've ever done in my life has been in the context of a group or an ensemble.
Mm,
And so I'm not particularly used to working alone. And I'm sort of always within, I think of like a constellation. So there's a lot of gravitational pulls happening. And so most of the time when we're in a room, it's because we're in a room with different, I mean, collaborators who bring all of their dreams and wishes and aspirations to the table as well. So anything that I've been a part of that's iterated has iterated because of dreams that I have, but also because of the collision of those dreams with other people's dreams. So that's a big one for me. I've never been a solo artist. I don't think I could. I don't think I possess that ability. Um, but yes, there have been different tracks and pathways of the work. I think a lot of people would think what we do is pretty. I've heard the word before. It's like you guys waste a lot of time,
mm,
because sometimes we'll work on a piece of art for like a year or 2 years and we never even show it, or we show it to a few people and then we go back and make it some more and then we premiere it. I like to think of our process as being really similar to that what we see in nature, that in the spring, like thousands and thousands of seeds drop and one or two take. And so a lot of times in the room, we are making tons and tons of material, and some of it lands in a show like Lugaru or Cryuron, but some of it goes in the compost pile over there. And so while some might think of that as waste, I think of it as compost. And so there's a giant pile of compost of like really great ideas that are never shared with the world. And I think over time, we're always reaching back into that pile as well, so some of these shows, like this track of work that happens about the land and the environment, they have become like a lifelong obsession. Yes. I think you could track from this art spot production show, Beneath the Strata Disappearing. That was an art spot show. Art spot and Mondo collaborated on Lugaru. Then we collaborated on Cryuron. We are now collaborating with the Land Memory Bank and Seed Exchange on a whole nother body of work called Invisible Rivers. And some of the themes of that work are definitely an Ezel Ballad of a Landman. So yes, I feel like there's a family of work that is really trying to investigate. I don't know how to summarize it, but what happens when we graft human built ideas on top of dynamic natural systems, and what are the consequences of that for our lives and the places that we live? Obviously, it goes into all kinds of depth from there. So that's a track of our work, but I would say there are other tracks of the work that Mondo does. There's a deep digital storytelling track. There's a really profound sense of and desire and electricity around listening to people's stories. There's a training and education track. And for the last 11 years, there's been a hosting other people's work, presenting work track. So yeah, we get into these pretty deep currents, I would say. And one thing that I've been interested in, and it's not necessarily something all my colleagues are interested in, but Cryuon was 7 to 8 years of work. This Invisible Rivers work we're in, for a lot of reasons, included COVID, around year 4. I like the long investigation, and I like to figure out what happens when we stick in a subject matter and relationships for a long period of time. And I actually believe that's where substantive change comes from. I don't also do well as a performer or as a creator and like a 6-week process, if that makes sense. Part of choosing that path is that I think I understand my body. Like, I'm not really good fast in the room. And so it just takes me time. But I also, I just trust that now. And I'm okay to interrupt that as well for certain processes. We did a piece during COVID called COINTEL Show that Bruce France starred in, and me and Dan Proxarnical worked on, and we made it relatively fast, and it was cool. But I think overall, I like to see how things iterate and how they evolve over time, and I sort of think of like how water, makes jagged edged rock smooth. Like, I'm okay with the long process there.
It requires an incredible amount of patience and faith that something's going to come out of the process. And just a real you have to stand up for the work in that process. I feel like one of the things that happens for me is that I get all wibbly, and I feel like I have to show my work, So I remember there was this moment of tension for me at when we were starting into COVID, and you and I were the two people that came forward to Roots and said, we need to start having conversation with the community. And And I said, I feel like we need to start doing work now. And you were like, we need to be listening. This is the time where artists need to shut up and just listen to people. And I feel like there's this like beautiful tension between those two impulses in that moment of crisis, especially for artists, of like who's the frontline first responder and who's the fourth, fifth, and sixth line responder, you know?
I
Yeah.
think you're so right. I mean, ooh, there's so many dances in that, right? I think one of them, I'm shocked that theater people don't talk more about this, but there is something about our form. One of the things that it's predicated upon is getting up in front of other people and receiving some type of praise or applause for what it is that you present to others. There's that part of it. There's also a very deep ritualistic part of it that's about getting together in an intimate spaces, sharing story. So I get confused like anybody else when, you're not on stage for 3 years and somebody's like, do you even work anymore? Are you an actor? Like, no doubt about it. I mean, there's something about you being seen and witnessed that is very important to my identity, of course. I think where I was in COVID was having learned from people like Carol B. Bell at the Ashe Cultural Arts Center after Katrina, when Bruce France, co-founder of Mondo, Bizarro, and I at first walked into Shea, it was cleaning supplies.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, there's a time and a place for everything. And we'll get to the theater and the stage will be cleared of cleaning supplies. But I think one of my instincts during COVID was like, oh, what a great opportunity to slow it down a little bit
Mhm.
and to see if we have been working in healthy and sustainable ways. I think many of us felt as though, and I know I was here, this is a nice opportunity to check in with where we are.
Mhm.
And I wasn't surprised that when we all started slowing down and checking in, a lot of things bubbled up to the surface about our field, about how we're working, about the people we are, about our inability to face down many truths about race and sexism and class. So that was my instinct. But I think your instinct's also right. We are essential workers. Storytellers are first responders too. And so we have to balance an output with an input, no doubt about it, you know.
Well, and I think also capitalism gets in the way sometimes, you know?
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, like it does come down to your productivity and how can you keep putting bread on the table?
Yeah, and also I was talking to my friend Ray yesterday, was talking about you know, we were just talking about environmental work in New Orleans. They're doing this amazing project, climate culture. And I was just like, like I love the scientists and the policymakers and everybody working on the issues, but they all experience it like this, all the
Mhm.
time. And I think we're experiencing the world in a very irrational way. And I
Mhm.
don't think I'm interested in making art that gives prevalence to reason at all times. Like how I think the artist's role is to jump into and create conditions where we can experience that type of irrationality and circuitous pathways, and feel good about it. Like how can the art help us metabolize the grandiosity of like emotions we're experiencing during these times? I don't think we're coming out of COVID, but I think many of us are still carrying a lot of grief, a lot of emotion, a lot of things that don't always make sense. And I'm still confused about the ways I've even changed and I'm changing. And so when I go to my practice, I'm not going there just to be able to articulate sense of the world at all times. And that includes sometimes not understanding when it's right to share in a public facing way
Mhm.
or when it's like to share uh, to just a small group of people. I think I'm still working all of that out for myself right now. Um, and it's because I realized like a lot of the structures that I was forced into, they weren't always serving my work.
Mm.
You know, I went back to a conference this summer and I realized like this looks so different now
Mm.
to me. I was like, wow, everyone's just organizing their own busyness here. It's like we are really like organizing our busyness and we feel good about it again somehow. But am I making deep substantive connections at the level of like the heart and emotion? And
Mm.
are we talking about real things? Or are we back to where I felt I was in 2018, like full and seen, busy, and really like a little burnt out, you know? So I think there's still things to be unpacked and examined here.
Yeah.
Um, you know.
So can we get back to my question about what are your thoughts about the distinctions, if there are any, between storytelling and theater?
Yeah, I am probably with you. I mean, speaking of roots, Roots has been such a great teacher for this question, like learning that in the deep South, it's a blurry line, right? That story work and theater work are, they are braided together. But if I were to take it way back, I mean, the heart of it all to me is the desire to tell story, the desire to make sense of the world, the desire to like look up at the stars and see if I can, weave together some understanding of the memory in the sky. I mean, I feel like that is as old as it comes. And I think there are things that become theater from storytelling, but the heart of it always to me is to tell a story. That's like the most simple act. Uh, like I never come home and list the things that I did or saw from the time I woke up. Like I never like clothes, toothbrush, breakfast, car, you know, office rehearsal. I'm always like, somebody's like, how was your day? And I'm like, oh, well, today I saw something really interesting. And then there begins the reenactment or the memory of my day. To me, that's all storytelling.
Mhm.
Now, how that storytelling gets bifurcated and pretty prismatic when we start making things like dance and multimedia performance and podcasts and that kind of thing. I mean, I think we can get into all kinds of arguments around genre,
Mhm.
but to me the heart of the matter is like, to me, the only medium profound enough to hold the complexities of us as human being is the medium of storytelling. That's
Mhm.
how I feel.
Mhm.
I feel like we it holds like all of the things at once, and sometimes it becomes like a type of artistic genre. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah.
So I feel like our dance people feel like
Mhm.
they're storytellers, but they don't use words.
Sure.
Mm,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I think the reason why I'm sitting with this is because, I'm building this piece. It's the reason why I'm
Yeah.
having these public dialogues with people. And, I'm calling it a part of my research. And I I'm working sometimes with theater makers, and so they'll talk about my blocking
Hmm.
or, my script. And frankly getting to an age where script is getting a little bit harder for like a full one woman show, and I also think that because I interact with the audience sometimes, like it does still feel very much like it's storytelling. So I don't know if it's attention necessarily, but I'm just trying to like press into it a little bit and see where I feel like it's important and where it's not important for me to know as a practitioner, what is this distinction here?
I, that's a great one. Um, One, I think we have a tiny field, and it's always shocking to me that our field is so interested in like making itself smaller and smaller and more categorized and more categorized. It's like this whole distinction between the community-based theater and the art for art's sake. I mean, it's just like, whoa. I think the better question is, what do you want to do with your work?
Mm,
And what is alive?
mm,
That's what I seek when I see something. It's like, is there some life here? Is there some passion? You see some sort of impulse of life that could move people?
mm,
And what are you hoping happens? So, what you can call it a storytelling event, you know, and go to a story slam with it. But I think if it's alive, it can show up in a theater. It can show up in a classroom, it can show up around a fire if it's alive and it is seeking to do something. So that would be my first question, is like, what do you want to happen when you do the work? Are
Yeah.
you trying to move, change, or shift something? Is it for you? Is it for your own healing? You know, what are some of those things? Um, I think you're right that it's people got to feel like what they know as their expertise is seen. So if someone knows a lot about blocking, of course, they need to be seen as someone who knows a lot about blocking, you know. But I mean, there are other artists out there that like I don't think Celeste Miller would do bad if she could block you,
Mhm.
right? She could choreograph you, right? But she's like a an alternate roots artist, for those who don't know, and wonderful, incredible, visionary artist. She could also sit there and just listen to you and shape and shift the way that the story moves through words too, because she's an open person who's fluid and is a true artist, you know. And so while she's designated as like the choreographer, I feel like she could help move the work just by listening. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know?
Great.
So
So
yeah.
you got the word
What are
passion.
you calling it though? I mean, I'm curious, what are you calling it and what do you want it to do?
Well, I mean, it's definitely very interdisciplinary, especially the version that I'm bringing to Roots, because I've started developing a movement piece that will be, I think, just for Roots. But I don't know, maybe not just for Roots, but because most necessarily for Roots, I'm only doing a section of it, and I think somewhat because of how I had sort of shown up for Shimmy in that interesting,
Hmm.
very not like me way last year. I
That was
started
great.
I started imagining like how can I get into this story in a more succinct way without trying to do the whole show. I can't do that obviously. And I just started imagining an imagistic way to introduce the fact that um, it's a show that's about this like endless string of jobs that I had um, after I graduated from college. And I'm still going to do that a little bit with text, but and then there was this one particular song um, that came to me, 9 to 5. I was like,
Hmm.
it's the quintessential song about working. And so
Hmm.
I got a great opportunity to work with a young music editor. And it's very interesting because he's exactly at the point in his life that I was at when this story takes place. So
Mm.
we're having this great intergenerational conversation. And so I picked out a few more songs that are from that exact time of the late 90s, and we've edited together some music. So I'm going to do this movement piece and then go into one section of the story.
Mm.
Um, and so I think it is definitely storytelling in whatever
Yeah.
way we define it. Yeah.
Can
But
we
you
talk about go
go.
ahead.
Mhm.
I don't want to leave it, but I want to you're making me realize there's something I never talk about my own personal practice, which is I realized this summer in some reflection, I was like, I don't write about it either, and I don't ever mention it. But like part of my own practice of creating is always to start with the body and for
Yeah.
there to not be words. And one thing I feel like I've meditated upon this summer is that I'm really grateful for about process is that when I'm making physical material, I'm journeying through a lot of landscapes of memory, territories of experiences in my lives, and all of that is mostly for me, and it's mostly my own intimate journey when I'm making it. And I'll end up showing something, but I don't ever explain it what it is that I'm showing. And I am like so grateful having gone through all kinds of different like generative somatics and therapy, all kinds of things in my life. I'm like sometimes I'm proud of that part of our craft that is like, wow, we are so far ahead as like body people, like the gift of being able to be in there and to take what's inside and express it somehow out um, in ways that make sense to people and in ways that don't, and in ways that never need to be shared. That's like a part of practice that I think is so good. And I believe when the audiences witness that, and I hope I'm so excited to see what you do, because it's like what allows me to breathe into whatever it is you're saying. Because we're full of words. We're like full of words. We're always like from here to here. And so when you start moving, um, I think it's so profound, you know.
Yeah. Well, your work is incredibly physical, and I think that it's even if you never say it, it definitely shows up in the work and the profound rigor that you bring to the work. So I think it's the gift of all of those years that you put in before you ever show up on stage.
Mm.
Um, we'll have to talk more about that when we get together at Roots.
Come
But
on.
you dropped the word passion in a few minutes ago, and I wanted to mention that. So the four tenets of my project are power,
Oh, great.
passion, purpose, and possibility. Um,
Power.
passion,
Oh, great.
purpose, and possibility. And so one of the things that I do in these conversations is I use those four words as a kickoff for somebody to tell me a story.
Okay.
So I want you to think of a story from your own life that is inspired by one of those four words: purpose, passion, power, or possibility.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Purpose, passion. Mm-hmm. Hmm. Um, I will tell a story about possibility
Okay.
that is inspired by something that happened during a performance this year. So we were performing at a conference gathering called Art and Survival. It is a gathering that was started by Matthew Glassman in 2012, and he was then the artistic executive director of Double Edge Theater. And for many years after that, I helped to co-curate that with Matthew and many other people. And this last year, Ebony Golden, who along the way joined in, became the curator of the final Art and Survival. And Ebony put together this incredible gathering of people that got together at Double Edge. And we brought the Mondo and the Land Memory Bank. We brought an excerpt of this Invisible Rivers performance we're making. And myself and Joanna Russo and Jeff Becker and Bruce Sunpai Barnes and Monique Verdun, we made this 25-minute piece. And it's all about the history of a river system, and really naming the invisibilized histories from the top of the Mississippi River to the bottom. So we're developing it, we're making it, and of course, the little genius that he is, we call him the ingenious little feller, Jeff Becker. There's this use of rope in the piece, right? And there was this time when the piece transitions where this character I play that's sort of like embodying the spirit of a snake, kind of like is then performing down this rope, right? And you see him use the rope. And so, of course, Jeff has this idea for there to be like this incredible design moment where instead of rope at the end, you know, Monique picks up this bent copper pipe. So all of a sudden the rope becomes solid. And he kept saying, like, we're gonna put water in the rope one day, and we're gonna somehow, like, the river's gonna come out of the rope and or the copper pipe. So look, we worked on this and worked on this, but we really did not figure it out. We knew it was possible. And whenever Jeff says something to me, I learned to just I don't ask like how anymore because he gets really upset. So but we knew it was possible, but we just couldn't figure it out. And I had completely let go of that possibility. So we staged this performance. It's going to be our piece goes over to this piece with Ebony. There's a sort of procession on the land at Double Edge. She's doing this piece called In the Name of. And then we were going to finish at the pond where the Double Edge piece, it was this all female identified version of the Bacchae. And the notion was that we put a little water in this little, you know, this piece of copper pipe, and then it processes, you know, the river processes and it's passed. And Monique's carrying it the whole time. And she brings it to the the lake at the end. And I'm not sure where even they did this, like if cork was pulled out or whatever, but Monique picks up this river piece and she turns it. And Shannon, it was like, in my mind, 5 minutes of water who came out of here. I was like, is there some sort of pipe in the backside of it? And like, it was such an ooh ah moment by the audience. And having known that there was a possibility that we could one day put water in it, and then watching this magic that I think we all swear to this day was somehow, it was intervened upon us, or we didn't even know it was possible for that much water to exist in a copper pipe. Um, it was so magical, and it just brought out to me like that feeling you have when you first think something's possible in a work, and then you watch it grow and become complete, and dare I say magical. um I love that part of making art, and I especially love that part of making art with people who are like especially designers and just visionaries who are always like really dreaming for you. Like we could make something amazingly possible happen. That's something that happened to my body this year, and it still gives me like the tingles to think about that, how it even occurred, which I still don't know. Either everyone's lying to me and they figured it out without me, but I don't think that's the case because even the designer didn't really know how much that much water came out of that river piece.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, I love your P's. I'm gonna think about them all. Those are great story prompts.
Yeah, and it's been hard to keep it contained at just those four because there's more that keep coming up and seem to want to be there sometimes. Actually, the word
Mm,
productivity keeps wanting to put itself there, but it's such a negative in so many ways, but it's
mm.
kind of a thing that I think is there for me in my stories about the ways that I've subverted my search for who I am.
Oh
You
yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm only the thing that's so interesting about this project is that it's really undoing a lot of my stories
Oh,
in the best possible way. But
that's great.
yeah, yeah. I
Can
mean,
you unpack that? Like, what is that? Like, just in a little example, what does that undoing for you seem like or look like?
well, I'm going to try to talk about this without getting too emotional, but even just last night, as I was preparing for our conversation, I was thinking about my journey through Roots as a staff member and
Yep.
the opportunity. So part of the story that I'm going to tell at Roots has to, I'm going to, my Sankofa seed moment is I'm going to talk about the opportunity to be mentored by Joe when I was on staff.
Yeah.
And Joe Carson, anybody who's listening, was our founder. And when I was on staff at Roots, I had the opportunity because I was helping to collect money for Joe's cancer care. Um, she found out that I was starting to dabble at storytelling for the first time in years, and so she invited me to
Hmm.
start sending her my stories, which was an incredible gift and an opportunity. And it just like woke me up and shook me up in a totally different way. But I just
Mm,
wasn't ready in some ways to receive that gift. I mean, it was just part of the journey.
hmm
And I was still hiding behind productivity,
hmm
and I continued to for years. Um,
mm, mm. Yeah.
so there's a lot there, the messages that we receive about our worth and what we have to do to deserve to be in spaces.
hmm Man, phew, the gifts sometimes unfold much, much later, you know. I really, I'm struck by that word undoing. I feel like this summer was a big meditation for me about a type of undoing, you know, which is when I realize that I am comfortable in my definitions and in my languages and in my processes. I start to hear this little voice that tells me to like shake it up
Mm.
and maybe think that you might be wrong or that you don't understand or you need to undo it, you know, like um, to try to be brave enough to just to keep searching is I think a you know anyone like Joe who could last that long and make such profound work, you got to know that our teachers were also just like sitting in their long periods of uncertainty and undoing and not knowing and feeling like nobody saw them and nobody recognized them. You know, it's not all roses.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
it's a hard path to keep doing it. So I commend that. That's a really awesome thing you're doing.
Well, thank you. It's it's a gift that life is long. Life is long and short.
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah. Um, I mean, it's going to be interesting and humbling to call on her name in the midst of that story, and it will be especially interesting because we've grown and evolved and gotten younger at Roots. So, probably less than half of the people in the room will know who she is. So I'll have to be in this weird space of having some people go, "Who the hell are you to insert her into your story?" And the other half being like, "You have to tell us who she is in order for this to land."
Hmm. Yeah, I don't think too many people would be who the hell are you, but
It's just this weird balancing act. I think, and I wrote about this I had an opportunity to write for the Roots book. I find myself as a Gen Xer feeling this weird place of, having one leg in between the two generations, you
yeah,
know.
for sure. I think it's a weird place. I just talking to my buddy Daniel Alexander Jones about this the other day, seeking a little advice because it is a part of a journey that no one really talks to you about either. When you are no longer an emerging artist and you are not anywhere near someone who's like on the other side of that, an end of career artist, and like you're right in the middle, and that liminal interstitial space is you're figuring that out as well. I know I am, just trying to be like, uh, what's the role here? And it is a straddling role. Um, yeah, I think it's got a lot in it.
Well, and then add on to that layer that I'm only just beginning my journey as a,
That's right. That's right.
you know,
Yes. Yeah.
it's very strange.
Yeah. Some of that stuff is, yeah, I don't know. You know, I like to upend these like student teacher relationships and age means this relationships. I mean, I think we all also experience the profundity of people around us who are like much older than us and so much younger than us,
Mhm.
and the profundity of people who are 20 years old and so much older than us. Like, I don't really buy into the hierarchical nature of like teacher student and all this. I think at any given point, it's just where you are in your journey. So, like you're saying, you might just be like, yeah, I'm fresh at this, so it's all still new. It doesn't matter how old I am, it's all the things at once. I think we live in a society that places a lot of onus on how old we are
Mhm.
and what we're expected to do at certain ages. And it's hard to combat those narratives for
Yeah.
sure, you know.
Yeah, no,
But thank God for places like Roots.
well, same. And I'm actually turning 49 next week at Roots, which it's always so
Hell yeah.
birthday is always right there at Roots, or right around the time we're at Roots. So it's interesting that I track my growth, it's like when you're a kid and you have the lines at the house.
Hmm.
I didn't grow up at the same house, so I never had that. So I just think of Roots as that little like.
Yeah. I agree with you. It's a big marker.
Mhm.
It's a lot to give thanks about, that family tree, and those little etchings that you get to see about what you've been fortunate enough to learn from all the amazing people there. I know I feel that every day.
So how do you get ready for Roots? Like what's your annual tradition for going to Roots?
You know, last year my annual tradition was I was trying to show up as quiet as I could. Um, and I might be in a similar place this year. I tried last year to just be prepared to listen. It was just I was, recognizing that it was a year where maybe I didn't get a chance to touch down into as many regional gatherings. I didn't get to be in as many calls. I wasn't involved in the XCOM or too many work groups. I feel like I have my ear to a lot of things happening with Roots, but hadn't performed or done a lot of things that were forward facing. So during those moments, and having been as a part of leadership in many organizations, I feel like one of my roles is to try to listen more than I talk, to see if I can just clue into what the energy is. Because I'm aware that there is so much work that has happened that I've not been a part of. And, you know, some of the things we do at Roots include inserting ourselves like pretty robustly into the room um, at all points, even if we haven't done the work. And that's another beautiful part of Roots. So this year I'm really excited. Um, I, we had to make the decision this year again not to bring work to Roots. Our crew kind of collectively, not all the way collectively decided, but there was a lot of energy around people. There's a lot of circumstance in the ensemble of work we're building where people were really tired. Um, and so that was a clue for me again to just be like, I'm trying to prepare to receive from Roots and to give to Roots in whatever way I can. That's what I'm really meditating upon. Um, the more it goes along, the more precious I feel the relationships I have there. And so I always feel a little bit pressed to catch up with everyone. Um, and I'm also profoundly moved to just learn more about who's doing what, and especially younger people, younger folks who are like work I haven't seen, the energy of that work. I'm always moved to see whatever art is presented at Roots. So, but I guess if I could characterize it, it's that of like I come with a soft and open listening this year is how I'm trying to prepare myself. Um,
Well, in a much more mundane way, I'll tell you one of my rituals and routines when it comes to Roots is that, so I'm
yeah.
not a caffeine drinker. I drink decaf coffee. But
Hmm.
it's so tired at Roots that it's like the one time of year that I let myself. And so every day
There
I
you go.
start with a regular coffee. And then just to make the drive home, I always stop. There's a soda pop machine on the back porch of the cafeteria where we eat, and it has cheer wine. The North Carolina
Yes.
like like a cherry flavored, and it's a caffeine bomb. And so I always get myself a cheer wine to go on the road from the back porch. It's like one of my favorite rituals. And I started like the first year when I was um, organizing the annual meeting, and it was the only thing that kept me from running off the road.
Oh yeah, that's really good. I do remember those drives home. Uh, Unfortunately and fortunately, I've been flying to Roots. It's just the way that this week has worked with other things in my life, but I really cherish the drive and the drive home because it's like, 10, 11 hours. So I would remember just like how fast that drive would go home because of driving with someone, and like having the time to like decompress for 10 hours was I found very helpful, but also like, man, 5 hours into it, you're like, it's either going to be espresso or something here because I am not going to stay awake having stayed up all night at Roots the night before.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing you in North Carolina next week, man. I hope that your travels are safe. Thank you so much for taking this time with me. And
oh my God,
I just
I'm
think
so
you
honored.
sliced bread.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks for the quality of the conversation and especially the questions. That's really, it's nice to be asked questions that push you into some good territory. So I feel good about that.
Um,
I'm gonna have a good day.
all right. Take care,
All
Nick.
right. Okay. Peace.